Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to look at 3 real-life stories of people who place a little too much trust in their GPS. The first 2 stories involve people who end up in places they were never meant to be, and sadly, both situations ended in tragedy. The third story takes a different turn. While no one was harmed, it still shows how blindly following GPS directions can take you much farther than expected, across several countries, in fact. This is their story. On August 1st, 2009, Alicia Sanchez set off on a family trip with her 11-year-old son and her dog. They were heading out from Las Vegas with plans to explore parts of Death Valley National Park, including Scotty's Castle and UB Heavy Crater. Before leaving, Alicia let her family know about the general plan, but she didn't mention exactly where they'd be staying that night. They packed their things, got into their Jeep, and began driving. At some point along the way, Alicia entered the destination into her GPS and simply followed the directions it gave her. It's still not completely clear whether they ever reached their intended stops, but somewhere during their trip, she turned onto a gravel road called Owl Hole Spring Road, which leads toward the Owl's Head Mountains. As they continued driving, they passed China Lake Naval Weapons Center and eventually made it to a communications tower at the end of the trail. That's where their Jeep got a flat tire. Alicia changed the flat tire using a spare she had with her. Before driving off again, she left the damaged tire and a water bottle on the side of the road. That decision, while small at that time, would become very important later on. After the tire was changed, instead of turning around, Alicia continued driving deeper into the desert. She drove another 30 miles, still following her GPS, until she reached a sharp right turn. This turn wasn't marked on any official park maps, but she took it anyway. While driving along this unfamiliar trail, the Jeep suddenly dropped into an annual burrow and got stuck. Alicia tried everything she could to get it out, but nothing worked. Now stranded in a remote part of Death Valley with no cell phone signal, Alicia had to figure out what to do next. They had brought 24 bottles of water, some cheese sandwiches, and Pop-Tarts. While that might sound like enough for a short outing, Death Valley is one of the hottest places on Earth. That day, temperatures had climbed to 119 degrees Fahrenheit. In that kind of heat, water runs out fast and food alone isn't enough to keep you going for long. Alicia was a nurse, so she had some understanding of how the human body reacts in extreme conditions. She knew they were in a dangerous situation. At one point, she climbed a nearby hill hoping to find a signal, but she still couldn't reach anyone. No one knew where exactly they were. There's still some confusion around when exactly they became stranded. Some sources say it was Saturday, others say it might have been Monday. What is known is that Alicia was supposed to return home by Wednesday to begin her midnight shift at the hospital. When she didn't show up, her family knew something was wrong and reported her missing. Park rangers began searching the north side of the park, which made sense at that time. That was the area near Scotty's Castle, the place Alicia had told her family they were planning to camp. Unfortunately, the search came up empty. On Thursday, her family shared one more piece of information. They mentioned Alicia had talked about changing a tire in the desert. The new detail shifted the direction of the search. Rangers turned their attention to the southern part of the park. During their search, they came across a flat tire and a water bottle sitting on the side of the remote road. It stood out, and they decided to follow the tire tracks leading away from the spot. Those tracks eventually brought them to Alicia, her son, and her dog. When Alicia saw the rangers approaching, she walked towards them. She was visibly weak and suffering from heat exhaustion. Tragically, her son had passed away the day before. According to Alicia, he died not long before help finally arrived. Later reports suggested that if the search had started in the south, her son might have survived. But the rangers had focused on the north because that's what Alicia's family believed at that time. It was the most logical place to begin, based on the information they had. Alicia was taken to a hospital and treated. Her condition wasn't life-threatening, though she had clearly endured a lot. The family dog also made it out alive. Albert and Rita Chrétien were a married couple in their late 50s from Penticton, British Columbia. In March of 2011, they set out on a road trip to Las Vegas to attend a trade fair. The two of them were traveling in their 2000 Chevrolet van and had planned their route using both a GPS device and a paper map. At that time, GPS technology wasn't as advanced as it is today. It didn't take into account changing weather conditions or road closures, and it wasn't always great at keeping travelers on the safest or most reliable path. Following it without question could sometimes lead to unexpected or even dangerous situations. After a long drive, Albert and Rita crossed into Oregon and stopped in Baker City to get some food and fill up on gas. After their short break, they continued heading toward Nevada. They consulted their map for the quickest route to Las Vegas and entered the destination into their GPS. But instead of keeping them on major highways, the GPS guided them down a remote dirt road. At first, the road offered some scenic views, and there was no obvious reason to worry. However, the road in that region was still covered with snow and mud. Their van, which was only two-wheel drive, wasn't built to handle those kinds of conditions. Rather than turning around, Albert and Rita decided to keep going. They likely hoped that the road would eventually lead them back to a main route. But before long, they realized they were nowhere near where they were supposed to be. When they finally decided to turn around, it was already too late. Their van became stuck in the mud and they couldn't get it out. For the next 3 days, Albert and Rita tried everything they could to free the van. They had a shovel with them and used it to dig around the tires, but nothing worked. They also tried calling 911, but the cell signal in the area was weak and the calls wouldn't go through. At one point, they attempted to walk in search of help. They made it about 4 miles, which is roughly 7 kilometers, before Rita's knees began to hurt too much to continue. With no other option, they returned to the van. Eventually, Albert made the decision to go out on his own to look for help. He took the GPS and his cell phone with him and told Rita he would try to walk back the way they had come. She stayed behind in the van, not knowing that this would be the last time she would ever see him. Now alone, Rita had to survive with what little she had. She had some trail mix and fish oil capsules, which she rationed carefully. Thankfully, there was a creek nearby where she could collect water. She made trips to the creek every day. To pass the time and keep herself mentally strong, she read books and the Bible. That became her routine for the next 48 days while she waited in the van hoping someone would find her. On the 49th day, Rita's condition had worsened. She was growing weaker and more exhausted. While trying to get water from the creek, she found herself unable to walk back to the van. She had to crawl and eventually she lay down inside the van. At that point, she thought her time might be up. She closed her eyes and drifted off. Then something unexpected happened. A few hours later, Rita heard the sound of an ATV. It was 3 hunters passing through the area. They spotted her and came to help. Rita explained that she had been alone for 49 days and that her husband had left weeks ago to try find help but never returned. The hunters quickly contacted emergency services and Rita was airlifted to a nearby hospital. Her family had reported them missing after March 30th, the date they were supposed to return home. A search was launched shortly after, but it lasted only about 2 weeks before being called off due to poor weather and the lack of solid leads. The area where Rita had been stranded was extremely remote, and it hadn't been part of the original search area. Her rescue in the end happened entirely by chance. Albert's whereabouts remained unknown for more than a year. It wasn't until September 30th of the following year the hunters discovered his body. Based on the GPS data and other evidence, Albert had been heading in the right direction towards the nearest town. But somewhere along the way, both of his GPS and phone died. Without them, he lost his sense of direction. He ended up walking towards higher ground, not realizing he was moving into mountainous terrain. Temperatures in the area dropped well below freezing at night. At some point, exhausted, cold, and disoriented, Albert lay down under a tree and never woke up. On January 5, 2013, Sabine Moreau, a 67-year-old retired woman from Belgium, set out on what should have been a short and simple trip. She was planning to pick up a friend in Brussels, which was only about 50 miles from her home. Since she wasn't very familiar with the route and didn't consider herself tech savvy, she decided to rely on her GPS for directions. She entered the address into the GPS and began driving, trusting that it would take her exactly where she needed to go. What Sabine didn't realize was that instead of pointing her north towards Brussels, the GPS had mistakenly sent her southeast. Without noticing anything unusual, she began following the route, unaware that she was heading far off course. Sabine continued driving, not thinking to question the directions. Over the next 2 days, she made her way steadily along the route the GPS showed. She stopped occasionally for fuel and to rest on the side of the road, but she never considered that she might be going the wrong way. She believed the GPS would eventually guide her to her friend's home, even if the journey was taking longer than expected. As she drove farther from Belgium, the road signs around her started to change. At first, the signs were in French, which was familiar, but after crossing the Belgian border into Germany, they switched to German. Still, she didn't find it concerning. From there, she entered Austria and then Slovenia. Each time the signs changed language, it may have raised small doubts, but Sabine continued on, trusting the GPS to correct itself if needed. Eventually, she reached Croatia. By that point, she had crossed 5 international borders and traveled through 4 countries. The 50-mile drive she had originally planned had turned into a journey of nearly 900 miles. Along the way, she even had a minor accident, though it didn't stop her from continuing the drive. Only when she arrived in the Croatian capital of Zagreb and saw the road signs written in Croatian did it fully sink in that something had gone wrong. At that point, Sabine decided to turn around and head home. She finally recognized that she was nowhere near her intended destination. Around the same time, her son, back in Belgium, had become worried. Sabine had never arrived to pick up her friend, and no one had heard from her. He reported her missing to the police, who began a search to try and locate her. While the search was underway, Sabine managed to contact her son and explained that she had somehow ended up in Croatia. He was understandably surprised and confused to hear that his mother, who had only meant to travel a short distance, had accidentally driven nearly across the continent. Once he knew she was safe and starting her return trip, he let the authorities know and the search was called off. Sabine eventually made it back home without any major harm, though she had clearly gone through a very unusual experience. What should have been a routine drive to Brussels had turned into a 2-day journey across Europe. All of it had happened because she relied on a GPS that led her in the wrong direction, and she didn't realize it until it was far too late. I know a lot of you guys are skeptical of faceless channels using AI voice, but I assure you I am not and will not be one of those channels. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. I put in a lot of efforts into my videos and I always aim to give you the best experience possible. I would appreciate it if you can like, subscribe, and comment to help my videos get pushed to a wider audience so that one day I can offer you a much better experience. Again, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.